Sonic 06. We got Sonic Genesis.
A great game.
Sonic Riders are arguably the best thing to come out of that the 50th anniversary, depending on who you ask.
Was that the first Riders?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
And then Sonic Rivals, which Sonic Rivals. Well, actually, we'll get to that later in this episode. But yeah, it's a game.
It's fine.
Yeah, we'll get to it. But yeah, so the 15th anniversary for Sonic was not good for the Hedgehog in a lot of ways, and
it's iconic.
Yeah. So Sonic Genesis is essentially a port of Sonic 1 for the Game Boy Advance in 2006. So this was like really late. Like the DS was already like 3 years old by this point.
Oh damn. Yeah.
So this game, Sonic Genesis, is like the physics are completely wrong. The music sounds atrocious. The screen is crunched in ridiculously. Everything about it is broken, and it. Hey guys, I'm Bill, a one-time Instagram blogger and now a podcaster.
And I'm Alex, the chaotic neutral.
And together we are the Gaming and Collecting Podcast.
A brother-sister duo.
That talks about gaming.
And also anime.
And don't forget the collecting, sometimes.
Ah, forget it. We're just a nostalgia podcast at this point.
But anyways, guys, thanks for joining us as we discuss the games that shaped us. So, this is where I'd normally say, how you been? But we actually have a guest this time, and I'd like them to introduce you. Oh, sorry. I'd like them to introduce themselves.
He's a little nervous, I guess, because I'm here. Hi, hello, hi. My name is Thrak. Most people call me Thrak. And yeah, I'm here because I've been requested to discuss the topic for this episode because I have a little bit of knowledge in this topic. So, yeah.
Nice. Yeah, it's funny for like the last like few episodes we've been doing, like Zencaster has been just our enemy, and like every time I try to start an episode it just like crashes. So
Oh no.
I was like starting, I'm like, please don't screw up this time.
Knock on wood.
Yeah. But anyways, so I guess how you been?
Oh, I'm doing all right. Keeping busy. Just trying to live life to the best of my ability, I guess. Getting a little crazy out there. I guess I'll date this episode, but right now we're dealing with that Canadian wildfire smoke.
Yep.
Particularly in New York City, it's really bad. Where I am, it's not as bad, thankfully. But I did hear that I guess the U.S. has sent some people over to Canada to help out, so that's good. Hopefully that gets contained soon.
No,
Yeah.
we're in New England. I remember stepping outside on a Tuesday, like after work. It was like I didn't know about the wildfire, so I stepped outside. I was like wondering why the air was all smoky and why it was all like green outside. I was like, this is weird.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. It was smoky a couple days here. Like nothing awful, I guess, at least compared to say like Orange, New York. But still pretty rough.
Yeah.
In fact, I don't know if you saw, there was that funny picture somebody took of like in New York. There's like the orange sky, and there's a Diablo 4 ad, and it's like
Oh,
that
with
is
the like welcome to hell, New York City. I saw that.
yeah, the best advertising Blizzard has ever had.
Yeah. Speaking of Diablo 4, I actually picked that up today.
Yep.
Have you played it yet?
No, I only just grabbed it. I'm probably gonna play it.
It's gonna go on his shelf. And it's
No.
gonna sit there. And he's never
So people actually want to play this one, and I'm thinking about starting a Diablo group in the server. So trying to get some multiplayer sessions going, because shocker, there's actually crossplay on this, and it's freaking about time. But yes, so I'm looking forward to trying that out. Me and Alex are actually in the middle of playing 3 right now, so that's.
Oh yeah.
I'm curious to see how it holds up to the third one.
I've never touched a Diablo game, so I have no opinion. 4 looks good, but 70 seems a bit much for me, so I'll probably wait on like a sale.
Yeah. So what's funny is with 3, I actually bought it because literally, so I was like a junior in high school, I think, when that came out, and I remember like literally everybody in my grade bought it and was playing it, and I didn't want to be the only person not playing it, so I picked it up and ended up getting addicted to it because it's actually a surprisingly fun game.
I
See, I
will
got
only play 4 if the laser is in it.
I hear there's a cow room as well.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember I got peer pressured into playing the Call of Duty games back in the day. So maybe showing my age a little bit, but those were good.
See, I'm terrible at first-person shooters, so I always like died in them, and I was never invited to play.
Oh, me too. But it's all about the fun, Doesn't really matter.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, other than that, though, it's been mostly just trying to get through the work weeks. I'm currently on the hunt for a house, so that's been my prerogative the last month or so.
Any luck so far?
I've been outbid about 3 times now, so
It's unfortunately just the market right now.
yeah, it's not great.
It's due to collapse any moment now.
Oh god.
That's what I hear. And speaking of massive collapses, how about our topic for this episode?
We're not at the 3D ones yet, okay?
That is true. Although some of the 2D ones are
questionable.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that. So yeah, so actually to get into our topic, we've talked about it in the past, but we've done for this season we've actually been doing a bunch of revisits where we've been revisiting old topics from our first season of the podcast and kind of going over them now with like different opinions, and we're bringing in guest perspectives as well. And Sonic was actually, I think, our 25th episode, like way back when.
Was it?
And
I thought it was later.
No, it was the 25th episode, and I remember because we were going to do it all in one part, and we got through the classic games, and we were like, this is not going to be one part, so it ended up being a 2-parter.
Well, no, you were the one who was like, oh, we could do it in one, and I was like, I don't think we can. And then like it was like an hour, and I was like, Bill, we can't do this all at once, and you were like, okay, fine. But
yeah. So if anyone didn't guess, our topic for this episode is Sonic the Hedgehog.
Mario.
Sonic.
Mario. No.
The gaming journalist's favorite punching bag. Sometimes it's deserved. A lot of the times it's a bit blown out of proportion. But yeah, Sega's wonderful mascot.
A blue rat.
In a sense.
He's a hedgehog.
Same thing. No, just kidding.
He doesn't look anything like a hedgehog, but take our word for it. So for this episode, we're going to be strictly talking about the 2D games in the series because 2D Sonic and 3D Sonic are two very different things, as we've kind of alluded to. And also for time's sake, like there's a lot of 2D games and there's a lot of 3D games, and we kind of wanted to split the two up for this. So I guess to start, Thrak, what was your first experience with Sonic?
Well, Sonic, weirdly enough, was probably the first game I ever played. I remember growing up in the living room, my parents' house, we had this really nice big wooden entertainment center. So like in the middle of it was a nice CRT. To the left of it was like a glass door that had a nice stereo system full of cassettes everywhere. And then below the TV, there was your VHS, later on VHS DVD combo. Okay. And then to the right of it was the Sega Genesis, and there was an NES that hid behind it. And at the very bottom was a drawer. And when you opened the drawer, it was lined wall to wall with cased Genesis games. And we had controllers and some loose cart games. I don't know how some of them were loose carts, but my family had a lot of the sports games because my family's really into sports, so I played a lot of the Maddens and the NHLs and the World Series baseballs. We had some weirder stuff like Booger Man, which I still have a soft spot for that game. But we also had Sonic's 1, 2, 3, and Spinball. I'm not sure why we didn't have and Knuckles, and I ended up getting that one later. But the first one I ever played was Sonic 2. I must have been about 4 or 5 years old, and playing Sonic at that age really formulates a positive opinion on it, I should say. Because it feels like with Sonic, most people get think positively about Sonic, it's because they played it as a kid and they have sort of that nostalgic connection to it. And I mean, I definitely had that with Sonic as well, because like jumping into Emerald Hill Zone is like the first thing you ever do in a Sonic game, and it's like, oh, it's so bright and colorful, and it has a really good pace to it, and the music is great. I mean, just about every Sonic game has great music.
Yeah.
And it clicks in your head. And I never beat Sonic 2 until many, many years later, because I would always get stuck in Metropolis Zone, like most people. But it kind of, became sort of my thing. And I remember I played then through Sonic 1, Sonic 3, Sonic Spinball. Funnily enough, it was the early 2000s. And for Christmas, my parents were like, "Oh, what do you want for Christmas?" And I was like, "Oh, can I have like the new Sega console?" This was like 2002, and the Dreamcast was dead. And I guess they didn't have the heart to really explain it to me. So, and as I mentioned, we also had an NES. So I was like, "I'll get the next Nintendo console." And so I ended up getting the GameCube that I still have.
Nice.
But yeah, my first memory of Sonic was playing it on a CRT in the early 2000s, being just absolutely mesmerized by what I saw on the screen. And yeah, it was great. How about you? What was your first experience?
So I'll save mine for last, because I don't remember Alex's very well. Alex, what was your first experience with Sonic?
I think my first experience with Sonic was, I think you had gotten either a PlayStation 3. I think it was a PlayStation 3. And one of the games you got was Sonic 06. And I just remember, I think that was like the first like Sonic game you really started playing. I just remember.
So preface, it was the first one I technically owned.
Yeah, it was the first one to
We'll get to that in a second.
And I just would remember like going in and like seeing you play it and like seeing you like get visibly frustrated at times, and then just being like, "Why are you still playing it?" And you're like, "Well, because I don't have anything else to play."
Because that was when the PS3 came out, and there was literally 4 games worth playing on it.
So I just
didn't play MotorStorm.
I did. That was the only other game that and Lego Star Wars. That was like all I had.
And I just remember that, and I remember Silver the Hedgehog vividly. Yeah, that was my first experience. Is just like Bill getting angry, and then I just like come in and be like, "You okay?" And you'd be like, "No," and then I'd leave because you were in angry gamer mode.
2006, we were still in elementary school at that point. So, yeah, you can imagine.
Well, the good thing is with Sonic 06, you can only go up from there.
That's true. Yeah. And we'll get to it in the next episode.
And it started making Bill like Sonic games.
Well, let me get into how I first discovered Sonic, because it's actually a bit deeper than that. But we'll get more into 06 in the second part, because that game has... there's a lot to say about Sonic 06.
Oh, you don't say.
What do you mean? It's great. It's the best Sonic game ever made.
It's no use.
It is a masterpiece, but in a different way.
It's got a good soundtrack. You'll hear that a lot in this episode. So yeah, going into my first experience with Sonic, it was actually kind of interesting how I first discovered the series. So I guess going back, Alex, you remember we used to be in that after school like daycare kind of place because our parents were working and we had to
like in the cafeteria.
No, this was we went on the bus and got dropped off at, it was like this like daycare like building that we went to. Like I forget what it was called. It was like a little mini school thing, basically just for after school for parents that had to work. I don't know if you remember.
I don't remember. I have no memory of this.
It's the place. So going by our town, it's the place that was next to. That's where the Dollar General is now. That building that was over there.
Oh, the place with like the very sketchy playground.
Yeah,
that was like in the woods. I feel like children could get kidnapped there.
Yeah, anyways, I can't remember the name of it, but we had to go there. We had to go there every day after school because our parents worked really, really late. And I remember this because that place sucked because like you would literally just show up and you literally were there basically just sitting around because you had nothing else to do. And I didn't have a lot of friends at that time, so I would kind of just hover around the PC that they had and kind of just get any chance I had to play that. And I always remember because for the most part it was like your normal standard like PC entertainment games for like kids. Like you had all the humongous entertainment games, you had like the living books if people remember those.
Oh, such good stuff.
Yeah. But then it also had, believe it or not, like out of nowhere, it had a copy of the Sonic and Knuckles collection, if anyone remembers that. And the Sonic and Knuckles collection was a PC collection of Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles in one complete set. And I used to play that like nonstop all the time. And that was actually the first experience I had with Sonic itself. As for the series going from there, we always had PlayStation consoles. So, like, unfortunately, most of the really good Sonic games never came out on PlayStation. Like, the first real one I remember coming to PlayStation was Sonic Heroes. And if you're playing Sonic Heroes on the PS2, you're doing it wrong. But yeah, so I didn't like get into another Sonic game until 06 later when I got it with my PS3, and somehow it made me a fan. More on that later.
So you didn't get the Mega Collection Plus for PS2?
Nah, because we only had enough money to get specific games, and I would always buy RPGs just because they would last the longest.
Yeah, and the Sonic RPGs on the DS, unfortunately.
Yeah, we'll get to that. We might cover that game in the next part. A lot to say about that one too. Yeah, but so Sonic the Hedgehog, this series has it's best described as a roller coaster in a lot of ways. But going back to its early days, it was actually pretty simple, like of a series. It was very much designed to be like Sega's competitor to Nintendo, to Mario, like from the ground up.
The mascot character.
Well, because Alex Kidd wasn't working like at all, and Sega really
he had the name Alex. What a shitty name. Wait, that's my name. Sorry.
Yes.
I'm hilarious. Anyways.
But yeah, so Sonic was literally designed to be like the anti-Mario in every way. He was blue because of Sega's logo. His shoes were inspired by Michael Jackson and Santa Claus. And he was just kind of edgier. And I remember like reading about it, like the early Sonic stuff. They had like this band that Sonic was in, and like one of the band members was actually a prototype Vector the Crocodile. And he had a human girlfriend. It's weird how that's going to be a recurring topic as well.
Do you know the name of that human girlfriend?
I believe it was Madonna.
That is correct.
Yeah, I remember that. Sonic also had a whole bunch of random prototype designs. Like there was a rabbit, an armadillo who later became the character Mighty.
And funnily enough, that rabbit that grabbed things with its ears became the basis for Rystar.
That is true.
The hidden gem on the Sega Genesis.
And then the other proposed mascot was a Theodore Roosevelt-looking man in pajamas, who later became Dr. Eggman, or Robotnik in the States.
I always call him Robotnik.
As a Sonic comics reader, I tend to gravitate towards Robotnik, but I kind of flip and flop depending on the era. Like in the 3D games, he's usually Eggman. In this era, though, he's very much Robotnik to me in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I just think Robotnik flows off the tongue better than Eggman. Like, I know we're not talking the 3D games, but to give Sonic Adventure 1 some credit, they do a good job of introducing the name Eggman to the North American audience. Because in that, when you first see him, they're just like, "Oh, look, it's a giant talking egg. It's an Eggman." You know?
And I was an insult. I always remember because Dean Bristow just kind of like would blow it off, and he'd be like, "Silence." But yeah. So Sonic 1 is interesting in a lot of ways. Like, it's like the most like inconsistent of the classic Sonics in my opinion, because like it starts off really fast. But then, like, it's kind of a lot of the levels are pretty slow and very platformy.
Like with Sonic 1, I get the sense that they weren't quite sure what to do with the series. Like, they know they wanted it to be fast. They know they wanted it to be sort of that edgy counterpart to Mario. But I think because of the technology at the time and sort of the freshness, I guess they weren't too sure how to go with it. Because, yeah, one of the issues with Sonic, I find, is the level design kind of makes or breaks the game.
Yeah.
And Sonic 1 is, yeah, probably some of the most inconsistent level design I've ever seen, because the opening Green Hill Zone is perfect. All
Mm-hmm.
3 acts are fantastic. It's got great colors. The enemy placement is great. The music is great. The whole thing does a great job of showcasing why you should actually care about this blue anamorphic hedgehog. And it's all, yeah, perfect. And there's a reason why we see Green Hill Zone replicated all the time.
Mm.
And then you hit Marble Zone. And as a kid, it never really dawned on me how rough Marble Zone actually is, because I was just like, oh, it's the second zone, whatever, right? But the older I get, the more I'm like, yeah, this is like, it completely slows down the pace of the game, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that necessarily. But coming off of Green Hill, it just feels like a complete 180, and I see why it would like turn people off. And if anything kind of hurt Sonic's reputation at the start, it would be Marble Zone,
Mm.
because so many people complain about that zone. I don't think it's as bad as some people make it out to be, but they like really hammer in how like rough of a zone that it was. I really like Starlight Zone near the end. That does a good job of sort of getting closer to that Green Hill Zone style. And
Mm.
then the I can't remember it. It's the carnival themed one. I was gonna say
Spring Yard.
Spring Yard. Yeah, Spring Yard I think is really good as well. Labyrinth, I mean, it's a water level, so it's not very good in general. And then I always didn't like Scrap Brain. I always thought Scrap Brain was kind of iffy in its level design, but even still, it's quite a short game. So I think a lot of that stuff kind of flows by you pretty quickly.
Mm.
Um,
So interesting fact about Sonic 1 too. This game actually has a speed cap programmed into it. Because Yuji Naka apparently, like, the game was so fast when he was programming it that it actually made him sick, and he had programmed a speed cap into Sonic's running speed, which is why Sonic kind of like feels slower than normal in this game. And it's very apparent when you actually roll, because when you roll in the game, the speed cap is no longer engaged, and that's when he starts like flying across the screen.
yeah, and like the screen doesn't like stay with him; like he just like kind of hovers to the right.
Yeah.
Which is like unintentionally a really good way of showcasing like the speed, because it only happens occasionally. And it doesn't become a problem, like say in Green Hill Zone when you go down those tunnels and then it shoots you up into the giant ring set at this in the middle of the air. Like it's a really cool like showpiece. But yeah, if the whole game played like that, it would be unplayable basically. So
it's interesting too, because they actually removed the speed cap from 2 onward, but like by then they designed the levels around it, so it works very well. In 1, you can actually, there's ROM hacks of 1 that remove the speed cap, and it actually makes the game super ridiculous to play in a lot of ways, because it wasn't programmed that way.
I need to try that. I've never tried that.
There's a ton of awesome Sonic 1 mods. Sonic 1 is very fascinating to me because like it does so many things different from the later games. Like the colors are a lot more muted, like compared to like 2 onward. It's the only one that uses 3 acts per zone as opposed to the later 2 acts.
Mm-hmm. Sonic's sprite is different. He has like that almost like purple tint to him, and there's no spin dash.
That is also true. And there's only 6 Chaos Emeralds, and they don't do anything.
That is true. Other than at the end of the game, it's like, oh, you really beat the game.
You get some pretty flowers.
Yeah. Who doesn't like pretty flowers?
See, I like it more when you don't get them all, because then you just get to watch Eggman juggle them at the end and laugh at you.
Oh.
Yeah.
Which is always fun.
But speaking of the Chaos Emeralds, the special stages in 1 are not great. I've never been a huge fan of them. The whole like the rotating maze thing.
Yeah. So to explain this the best, especially so, Alex, I'm assuming you've probably never experienced these.
I'm not sure. Maybe through you or something.
Yeah. So the best way to explain the special stages in Sonic: imagine a maze, and the maze just perpetually rotates either left or right, and you can only sort of control your character going through it.
Is it like the tube where you go?
No.
Okay.
That's later.
Okay.
This is literally like Sonic is like it's still in 2D, and it's like the maze just kind of moves on like its own, and you have to kind of manipulate Sonic through it, but it doesn't really control great.
It doesn't really work.
No.
There's these little bumpers too that like speed it up or slow it down.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's
just what you need when you're trying to intricately turn every once in a while.
My favorite is when you get into the special stage, you hit a bumper and then go right into the end blocks, and you just go, great.
Womp womp.
Yeah, it took them a while to really get the special stage. Well, they kind of experimented with the special stages kind of throughout the series, but you know, I think they hit the really good one later.
Yeah,
but we'll get there.
We'll get
Is that
there.
the tube one?
Well, I don't know Thrak's opinion yet, so we'll find out. But, yeah, so what's fun here is going from Sonic 1. I guess we'll detour now into the 8-bit version of Sonic 1, which came out shortly after it. Have you ever played the 8-bit version, Thrak?
Oh, yes, I have. I actually beat the Master System version of it. And I guess it's a bit of a hot take, but I actually kind of like it. Because it's a completely different kind of game. It's closer to like more of like a Mario style game in terms of like the level design, and it's a little bit more mazy and intricate, and there's a lot of weird things that are different. Like there's an auto scroll level.
Yep.
Which Sonic auto scroller, terrible idea.
But the thing is, it's Bridge Zone, and I love Bridge Zone, so I look the other way.
Fair enough. And yeah, it's very weird, but I don't necessarily hate it. In a weird way, it feels sort of like the swan song for the Master System, because it was like, if I'm correct on this, it was the last game Sega made for the Master System. Like first party.
I believe so, and it was definitely the last game that released in North America.
Yes.
So
I mean, the Master System still lives. That system has never died.
Yeah, it's still going strong in Brazil.
Hell yeah. And,
so it gets a little confusing though, because the Master System did go on for many more years in Europe as well, and Sega still technically released a lot of Game Gear games for it. So I'm not sure if those are considered first party or not, but the last official made from scratch for the Master System, I believe, was Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yeah, which feels fitting, you know. And then the Game Gear version is just the exact same game, but with the smaller screen. So you have to deal with like screen crunch.
So I've played both, and I don't find the screen crunch super annoying in Sonic 1 in particular.
Yeah. I think in, say, like Sonic 2, it's a bit rougher for me.
So,
but speaking of different versions of Sonic 1, have you played that amazing Game Boy Advance port?
Yes, I have. So, Alex, do you know about the Game Boy Advance version of Sonic 1?
Possibly.
So,
well, it's related to Sonic 06.
It is.
Oh,
Sonic's
nice.
best
It must be
birthday
great
ever.
then.
So for people who don't know, the game that we're referring to is commonly referred to as Sonic Genesis.
Oh, I've heard you talk about this.
Yeah. So Sonic Genesis was one of 4 games released for Sonic's 15th anniversary. Sonic's best anniversary, in my opinion. That's being very sarcastic. So we got obviously the previously mentioned Sonic 06. We got Sonic Genesis.
A great game.
Sonic Riders are arguably the best thing to come out of the 50th anniversary, depending on who you ask.
Was that the first Riders?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And then Sonic Rivals, which Sonic Rivals. Well, actually, we'll get to that later in this episode. But it's a game.
It's fine.
Yeah, we'll get to it. But yeah, so the 15th anniversary for Sonic was not good for the Hedgehog in a lot of ways. And
it was iconic.
Yeah. So Sonic Genesis is essentially a port of Sonic 1 for the Game Boy Advance in 2006. So this was like really late. Like the DS was already like 3 years old by this point.
Oh, damn. Yeah.
So this game, Sonic Genesis, is like the physics are completely wrong. The music sounds atrocious. The screen is crunched in ridiculously. Everything about it is broken, and
It's like you had a first year programming coding student at like a community college.
I mean,
Like
it's
Sega
possible.
was like, "Hey, could you convert this Genesis game to the GPA?" And they were just and they shrugged their shoulders, shrug shoulder emoji, and they did it, and we got what we got. But
Maybe they gave it to an intern. They're
so
like, intern, will you port
that's
it?
that's
I'm
that's the fun part about Sonic Genesis. We don't know who made it, and they'll never
An
tell us.
intern did it.
very
It was
well
their
could have been.
final project,
Like
and they did not get the job after.
It's funny because that game's credits, they just lifts the credits from Sonic 1. So there's no actual like anywhere in the game which says who made it, and people have been like trying to figure this out for years because like one of the strongest rumors about why this game is so bad is apparently it runs off of the Sonic Advance engine, but
Yeah,
the Advance engine wasn't designed to run a Genesis emulator. So it doesn't it's like just broken in every way, and it's really impressive and also really baffling.
yeah, it's yeah, incredibly poorly optimized, and it's not like the Game Boy Advance couldn't handle it. You
So
know, you could play Yoshi's Island on the thing,
so
so it's
what
Yeah.
not like it couldn't handle it.
what's a fun fact is there's a little guy like independent programmer named Stealth.
Hmm.
He might come up in this list later, well, this episode later. He
Just
actually
maybe.
he actually made a proof of concept version of Green Hill Zone running on Game Boy Advance hardware that plays and sounds identical to Sonic 1, and basically he did it as a middle finger to Sega just to say it is possible.
I don't
Yeah.
know if it's necessarily a middle finger, but like, I mean, we could talk about how like the Sonic fan community is just so dedicated to it that
Mm.
they will fix games.
Oh yeah.
Like this isn't the only
I mean, they
instance
fixed
of
the
the fans
movie.
fixing the game. They
They-
did fix the movie, but this isn't the first time where they've like said, "Oh, we'll fix the game for you. Don't worry about it." And Sega, unlike Nintendo, are totally cool with it,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
and in some cases even hire them.
Yeah. More on that later.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's fun about Sega is as long as you're not like directly like interfering with a project they're working on like at the time, they don't care what you do with their shit.
Mm.
Like they're like, yeah, whatever, fan game, that's cool. um
I love that. It's one of the things I love about Sega.
Mm.
Now if you were making a game based directly off something that they were currently working on, I think they might have a problem, but that makes a lot of sense because it's something they're trying to make money off of.
Hmm.
So but yeah, so moving on now. So I believe the next Sonic game officially released was Sonic CD.
No, it
Well,
would be Sonic 2.
right. Oh yeah, right. That's right actually, because
Because Sonic 2 was November 92,
they
and then CD didn't come out till November 93.
that's right. What I was thinking was they were developed at the same time.
Mm.
Yes.
Because so this is where it gets. This is so Sonic's development is very confusing, and so basically what happened here was half of Sonic Team in Japan decided to go to America and work with the Sega Technical Institute. The rest of the team stayed in Japan. So the team that went to America, which had Yuji Naka involved, started working on Sonic 2. The rest of the team back in Japan, which featured Naoto Oshima, started working on Sonic CD.
And Naoto Oshima is known for being the guy who won that contest within Sega to make the mascot. He was the original designer for him, and then Yuji Naka, recent convicted man,
Yeah.
Was the original programmer for Sonic to make it all work. And it was the two guys coming together to really make it work. I mean, of course, there's other people involved with making Sonic work the way it does, but those are like the two guys who really made it work.
Yes.
And yeah, Yuji Naka was not a fan of Sega of Japan.
No, he was not.
And so that's why he moved to San Francisco at first Sega of America to then become essentially the Sonic dev team. In fact, that's where Sonic Team exists, I believe, or I think that's where it started, and then I think it's in Japan now.
So the main operations are in Japan, but for the majority of their existence, they were actually in America for a long time. It gets really confusing. The history. This completely breaks off of Sonic and goes into Sega territory in general, but the complicated relationship between Sega of America and Sega of Japan is
Sonic of America.
Yes,
Sonic of America.
It's very, very complex, and it's literally two sides of the same company that hate each other and
basically
constantly try to step on each other's toes.
Yeah, it's basically why Sega doesn't make hardware anymore.
Yes.
But that's a whole nother topic in and of itself. But,
yep. So
yes, but Sonic Team is based in Japan.
Yes.
So there you go.
So I guess getting into Sonic 2 now, I actually think the Game Gear Master System Game Gear version actually predates the original.
It kinda depends on who you ask.
I believe it was the first official appearance of Tails.
Yes.
And Tails dies in that game, and it's great.
Oh, oh no! Like for good or
no?
Just as you're playing.
If you get the bad ending, it's implied Tails died.
Could you imagine if that was canon that he died, and then all the times we've seen Tails since then,
it's just his ghost like haunting
he's either a ghost or he's like a premonition in Sonic's mind, you know. Yeah. So it's like Sonic, he's like talking to Tails, and then people look in the back and they're like, "Who is he talking to?"
Yeah. God, that game. I don't want to go too deep into Sonic 2 Game Gear Master System, but that game
sucks.
Yeah. It's so ridiculous. So I played the Game Gear version mostly because I haven't imported over the Master System version yet. But my God, the screen is so like crunched in. Like you die on everything. Like it's unnecessarily hard. The hang gliders suck. A whole bunch of shit. I do like Green Hills zone though. Not Green Hill, Green Hills zone.
Hills.
It's not even the first zone in the game.
No, it's not. It's like one of the rare Sonic games that starts with like an underground, like rocky level.
Like it's a minecart level, and like yeah, with the Game Gear screen crunch, it's just not good because you can't time it at all. You know, yeah. It's no Resident Evil 4 minecart section. I can tell you that much.
Yeah. The only significant thing about Sonic 2 Game Gear was it was actually developed, the first Sonic game to be developed by a company called Aspect, who would develop the majority of the handheld Sonic games for the Game Gear. The first handheld Game Gear Sonic game was actually developed by Yuzo Koshiro's company, Ancient, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm. The icon, Yuzo Koshiro. And
he did the soundtrack for that game, and he's the reason why we have the bangers such as like Bridge Zone and Treetop Zone.
Yeah, not to get off topic, but that man better be involved in the Streets of Rage movie. There's no point.
I know. I'm so glad he did the title screen for Streets of Rage 4, but
so good.
Anyways, so moving on, Sonic 2 is in a lot of ways the definitive Sonic game in a lot of people's eyes.
Yeah, in a way it is. When you think Sonic, like I think people think about the first game, but it's really the second game that is the one they're thinking about. Because I don't know why Sonic 2 was the first one I ever picked. It might have been when I was pulling the cases out, like the cover of Sonic 2 is just so good, you know? I mean, you have the black holes of Robotnik's eyes, or lack of eyes, and he's just squeezing the hell out of that checkerboard too. And then you have Sonic and Tails in front just being like, yeah, whatever, chili dogs. Yeah. And it's such in a way it is like an iconic image, more so than like the first game. Because like I think the first game's cover art, I think probably like the European version would be my preferred favorite.
I will say though, Tails kind of look like they fell on the ground and they're not attached to him. Is it just me, or does it look like they just fell off and they're just on the ground? Sorry, I looked at it for a second. I was like, did his tails fall off? Did Tails fall off? Anyways, moving on. I have great.
In any case, Sonic 2 is very iconic because it introduces Tails, or his full name, Miles Tails Prower, An obvious pun is obvious, and yeah, it's just they learned a lot of the lessons from Sonic 1 and its kind of, iffy level design and stuff, and made a much more solid game. There's more zones, but there's less acts. To me, like, I think all the zones are iconic.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Like, you have Emerald Hill, which is great, but Chemical Plant, love me some Chemical Plant.
Mystic
Even
Ruin.
like Mystic Ruin, Oil Ocean, and then that game's Casino Stage. I can't remember.
Casino Night.
Casino Night, yeah. That one with the slots and everything. Just, I know this game front and back, so it's a banger. It's so good.
Have you ever? Did you ever experience the Megasonic glitch?
No, I never did.
So it's a glitch in Oil Ocean Zone where there's a very specific cannon that if you fall into so if you're in that cannon, if you jump out of the cannon into a set of spikes that's right next to it and then fall back inside the cannon, the game's programming completely glitches out and Sonic runs 3 times faster and jumps 3 times higher for no reason. It is the most hilarious shit ever. I've only ever done it like twice, but when it happens, it's amazing.
Does he stay that way the whole game?
No, as soon as the zone ends, it goes away. But it's like for this one zone, you can just jump across everything. It's great.
Give him like moon jumping or something. That's crazy.
So it's not like super broken, but it's enough that it's like it's noticeable, like because it completely messes the physics up too, and it just gets ridiculous. It's great. It's actually it's like, so imagine like a slightly higher jump than like Supersonic. It's basically like your Supersonic, but faster. It can jump higher, and it doesn't go away.
Super duper Sonic.
Yeah. Speaking though, that's another thing that this game introduced: Supersonic for the first time.
Yes. Goku ass Sonic.
Oh, go on.
And also, because it gives you the 7th Chaos Emerald, and I guess they realized that, we should probably like do something with collecting all the Chaos Emeralds. Like, what should we do? And maybe one of them was just happened to watch Dragon Ball Z, and we're like, guys, I got it.
Yep.
I got it. His hair looks the same. Let's make it his whole body. And yeah, Supersonic came to be.
One of many Dragon Ball references in this series.
Oh yeah. Well, I think it goes to show the impact Dragon Ball has had on, like, not necessarily just Japanese culture, but I think just kind of culture as a whole. Because it's really, in a way, it's one of the earliest like references of it as far as like Western people picking it out, you know. And I know we didn't mention it with Sonic 1, but I'll mention it here as well. Both games were composed by Masato Nakamura.
Yes.
From the J-pop band Dreams Come True, which I've listened to a bit of them, and they're fine. But yeah, his soundtrack composition in 1 and 2 is just so good.
It is. It's also so unlike most Sega composers, also he actually owns the rights to all his music in these games. And that is one of the reasons why you rarely ever hear like Green Hill Zone, the original Sonic like theme, or the original ending theme, because Sega doesn't actually own the rights and they have to pay money to use those.
Yeah, even if they do like remixes for him in later games. So good on him. Good on him.
Smart.
In fact, there's a soundtrack compilation of both games. He put it out, I think it was in like 2011 or something like that, where it's both games soundtracks in full. So like all the level music, even like the sound effect, like you get the sound effect clips. And then there's you get all the demo versions. So it's like him composing them like with the real instruments that he had, like the keyboards and drum machines, which are are interesting looks, like kind of rough ideas of them. And then they take because I know Dreams Come True, they took one of the Sonic tracks that he had done and made a vocal song for it. And I forget which one it is off the top of my head, but that's also included in there as well. So it's a pretty packed compilation that I'd recommend you check out. You can find it on like YouTube and Spotify. I have the physical CD version because I'm a weirdo, but
looks over at my wall of Persona soundtracks.
But it's a great soundtrack, so can't deny that. Oh, Sweet, Sweet, Sweet. That's what it was. It's the ending theme for Sonic 2 that got remixed. It's called Sweet, Sweet, Sweet.
And then there was another remix of it later on in 06 with Akon for some reason.
Why not?
That's included on that compilation as well.
Awesome. Anyone remember Akon? No? Okay.
Yes.
I do. I do.
Yep.
Didn't he do the Get Low song?
Oh, I don't know.
That Akon?
I
don't know.
I only know Akon from Sonic 06, so
this isn't a music podcast.
Nope. No. Not today.
But yeah, so Sonic 2 to me is almost like pretty much a perfect game. I think its one blemish is Metropolis Zone can be a pain in the ass sometimes. That's about it, really.
Sometimes. You want to talk about some bad enemy placement and annoying bullshit that exists just to irritate the player, which was a very common thing in that era.
Yeah.
Like the grasshopper,
slicers,
the slicers, the crabs,
starfish.
the starfish, the fact that near the end of the zones it becomes like a maze, and it's like, I've seen this before. Like usually Sonic games are good with the level design at sort of tunneling you to the end. There are multiple ways to get to the end, of course, and you're rewarded if you can go the high one more often than not. But Metropolis Zone, they do that thing that I really don't like in Sonic games, and that's when the level design is mazy.
Yep.
Like the way Sonic is meant to be doesn't really work with mazes and being like, which way am I supposed to go? It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Even when you know the game really well, it still can be a challenge.
So another thing from Sonic 2 that we should bring up, because it's a very common recurring factor, is the special stages, and this was the introduction of the half pipe style ones. These are the ones you were talking about, Alex, where Yep. So yeah, these ones essentially are Sonic runs down a half pipe and you have to collect a bunch of rings and avoid a bunch of spike balls. Kind of cool graphically for 92. I hate these special stages though.
Yeah, they're pretty bad.
And Sega keeps reusing them in every Sonic game now.
The pre-rendered 3D graphics, yes, are very impressive for 1992. I love that tune. And when you are able to memorize them and actually clear them, it is very, very accomplishing, because they base themselves basically on Sonic's whole gameplay philosophy, which is trial and error.
Yes.
But yeah, with the special stages, the problem is like the draw distance doesn't even exist. So you just have to kind of draw like a map in your brain about, how I'm going to get there. And it wasn't until the full-on remake of it in like 2013 or whatever, the original mobile phone remake that's now in the Sonic Origins collection, that I was actually able to complete the special stages for the first time, because it's much smoother, the draw distance is so much better, and it's way easier to calculate where you're going to be. Because on the Genesis version, the original version, I couldn't get past stage 4 to save my life. Just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
You could say skill issue, but it was just tough to do. And I don't have the attention span to just sit there and figure it out. So
I actually I've only ever gotten all the Chaos Emeralds once, mostly because I actually think this game has a better ending if you don't have the Chaos Emeralds. Because Tails rescues Sonic when he falls from the Death Egg at the end, which is, I just think, a nicer ending.
Yeah.
But, I will say we're not going to be covering it in this episode because it's technically a 3D game, but the best implementation of the half pipe special stages was in the Saturn version of 3D Blast, where they're like full 3D and they're freaking epic.
Yes, those are pretty good.
Other than that, though, cool, impressive for the time, but I can't stand them. And I just find them so boring that they keep reusing the concept nowadays.
I think just because it perfectly encapsulates Sonic in like a special stage kind of way, because it puts the camera right behind him. It gives you that 3D perspective. You still have the sense of speed, and it's easy just to, make it sort of the, oh, go get the rings here. Oh, avoid the bombs here. Oh, God.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about the cut content from Sonic 2? Because it's kind of famous.
Yeah,
the stuff they left out.
So, Alex, do you know about this?
I don't think so.
Okay. So, Sonic 2 has like almost an entire game's worth of cut content.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of beta versions that have been leaked online that are different and have different level arrangements. There was the famous Hidden Palace Zone that was supposed to be in the game, but it was just cut entirely, though the song for it still exists in the original cartridge as as part of the sound test. And when they did that remake that I mentioned, they brought it back.
Yep.
Because there's that horrible bottomless pit in Mystic Cave Zone, which is just, to me, that feels like a design oversight. Like, who thought that was a good idea?
Oh, that was totally a design oversight. Like, there's no way they thought, oh, someone could get stuck down here. Oops.
Like basically a bottomless pit, but with spikes there, so you have to sit there and die. But in the remake, they take the spikes out, and if you fall down, you actually play Hidden Palace Zone and fight a boss, which is really cool. There was also a sort of desert level that has a screenshot that never came to be, though I think they reference it in a later level in Sonic Mania. I believe that desert level is based on that.
There was also Winter Zone, which was like it's apparently just the same thing as the desert level, but it had Christmas trees in the background. That's all we really know about it.
Why not?
There was a lot of ideas floating around for Sonic 2. Which I think goes to show how excited the dev team were to make the game and what they wanted to do with Sonic 2 as well. So,
and meanwhile, on the other side of the pond, Sega was also making another game for the series for their other piece of hardware that they were trying to push at the time, called Sonic CD.
If I recall correctly, I think Sonic CD and Sonic 2 were sort of in competition for what was going to be Sonic 2. And,
yes.
And the American one turned out to be the better game of the two. So that became Sonic 2. And then they let the team work on this for the Sega CD as it almost feels like a side game, even though it's part of the main line.
Yeah. So Sonic CD, I guess the best explain it is it's very much a traditional 2D Sonic game, but it has an interesting time travel mechanic where to get through the game, you have multiple ways of progressing. Like there's multiple options you can do. And what's cool is you can like go to either a past, present, or future version of each level. And depending on what route you want to take, you can either go back in time and destroy these robot generators to stop the robot invasion of the past, or you can just ignore it all, go to the end of the level and get the bad ending. Or the easiest way is getting the Chaos Emeralds, the Time Stones, which automatically give you the good ending. And the game has a very like non-linear, almost like Metroid-ish kind of design where their levels are very open-ended and expansive and not so much left to right, which for a Sonic game isn't the best design, but this is still in the early times where they weren't really sure what they were doing yet.
It's a unique idea, but exploration and Sonic don't really seem to go well together unless the exploration is complementing the sort of the speed,
Yeah.
Because Sonic CD, the maps are huge and very impressive because it's showing off the hardware of the Sega CD, so they can have these big giant levels with some extra details and like these expanded color palette and the CD soundtrack, which the Japan one I think is better than the North American one, but both are still really good. But it leads to a game that is kind of, as you mentioned, bloated and almost unfocused in a way that they were, I think, got more excited about the hardware than necessarily the game. But Sonic CD is notable because it introduces Amy and Metal Sonic.
Yes.
Two controversial characters in the series. And to be fair, I think they're all controversial in their own way or another. And it's so weird that some people would say... Yeah, it's weird that some people would say Sonic CD is like the best one.
So I actually have a theory behind that. the way I've always seen it was because Sonic CD was such a hard game to experience back in the day, because for the longest time the only way to play this game was on a Sega CD, or if you happen to have the PC port. I think a lot of people, like, there was like maybe the 3 people that had played it really enjoyed it and like would hype it up as like the best Sonic game ever made. And I think it kind of just got this kind of mystique behind it where like people like just assumed it was like this amazing game, and then they actually played it and were like, I'm not sure.
It's almost as like it was a hidden gem because most people probably played the Genesis Sonic games and were like, oh, I want another like 2D style Sonic game, and it's like, oh, there was this one all along. And yeah, it I think it's fine. Like, it has a different spin dash to it. There's like 2 different kind of spin dashes.
It's got the proto spin dash where like you have to, it like takes forever to charge up. And
yeah, like the screen moves over. And then there's also another one where you can do that, but it's just like Sonic and his legs spin real fast, like he's just running normally.
The super peel out. I love that sprite. Like the sprite for it is amazing, but
oh yeah,
literally when you use that thing, all you do is you let it go and then you just hold down so he goes into a ball. So it's basically just a spin dash.
Yeah, it's basically useless.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fluff in Sonic CD, not enough substance. Some good levels, some good level designs.
Cool level themes in particular.
Oh yeah, like as I mentioned, the Japanese soundtrack is phenomenal.
Actually,
like, holy crap.
Let's talk about the soundtracks for a minute. So you guys may have noticed that Thrak mentioned the Japanese soundtrack, well, Japanese/European soundtrack. For whatever reason, this game had 2 different soundtracks, one in Japan and Europe, and then the other in North America, which was the one that I think a lot of Americans are most familiar with.
I would say so.
I still to this day have no idea why they changed the soundtrack. It's never been explained. So
the only thing I could find is one of the guys who made the North American soundtrack had said that it needed a more rich and complex soundtrack, whatever that means.
So that's
what they were told.
Yeah. So the guy who did the North American soundtrack was a man named Spencer Nielsen.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give him props. The North American soundtrack is very good as well. I actually think in a perfect world, like, they would have given us like some sort of like toggle switch thing where we could pick which songs we wanted. Because I like certain songs from the North American version and I like certain songs from the Japanese version more. It's kind of one of those things. Like, I think the weird like roller coaster-ish level later in the game, I prefer the American soundtrack.
For sure. Because like the Japanese one has this real like heavy like techno house music vibe to it, you know, like it's almost kind of intense. And then the American version is much more laid back, and almost kind of like tropical in a way.
It's also very bass heavy, like a lot of bass. But I will say though, the Japanese soundtrack has the greatest boss battle theme ever.
Yes. Oh my god.
Have you ever heard it, Alex?
Maybe. So you might have showed me.
Imagine like, so in the American version, it's like this very sinister, like kind of like dark sounding theme.
Yeah, it has the laughter, the
Yeah.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
in Japan though, it is literally like a hype man and like this rapper, and like it's literally like this like guitar riff, and it just like this guy in the background singing like "work that sucker to death." Just constantly.
You've played this for me.
It's the most unfitting thing for a boss theme, but I love it. It's so crazy.
It weirdly enough, I feel like it would fit more in like the adventure era.
Yeah, probably
because we've gotten Sonic rap tunes later, but
that is true. And one other thing about Sonic CD that I guess we should mention is the animated cutscenes.
Yes. The I forget who did them, but they're the intro and the outro. And I mean, they're cool and all, but they don't really add anything, you know.
No.
Like I never even I think the first time I ever played Sonic CD was the Sonic Gems collection version.
That's how most people did.
Because Sonic CD was left off of the Mega collection for whatever reason, And so with the Gems collection, I mean, it was essentially an excuse to do Sonic CD, and then they just threw a couple random games in there and called it a day. If I remember correctly, that one doesn't have those animated cutscenes. At least I don't remember them. And it wasn't until many years when I actually, played it again, probably somewhere different, that I saw those animated cutscenes. And they're nice. I mean, they're kind of what you expect, Sonic running really fast, hitting things, running up that chain to the death egg that's somehow chained to the world.
Yeah.
I mean, very cool, very epic, very Sonic, but it doesn't add anything. If anything, it kind of sets the template for what Sonic would be in a more sort of an animated setting. Like, how would they show it without you playing the game?
Yeah. It also gave us two of a first for the series, which would become a recurring thing, vocal tracks. In the American version, we got the heavily iconic Sonic Boom song.
Sonic Boom, Sonic Boom. I love that song.
Yep. And then my also favorite is in Japan we got You Can Do Anything, which was the classic Toot Toot Sonic Warrior song.
Oh yeah, I'd forgotten about that.
With so I was on another podcast a while back, and the one of the hosts of the show literally, like, he thought for the longest time that was Eddie Murphy singing the song for some reason. I have no idea, but
I mean, Sonic does want to party all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't want to go too deep into the Game Gear games going forward, because the only other ones we really have are like Sonic Chaos, which is an incredibly short one, and then Triple Trouble, which is mostly notable for introducing Knack the Weasel.
I mean, that's why it's important. It introduces everyone's favorite, Knack the Weasel.
Or Fang the Sniper, as some would say.
Yeah, Fang the Sniper. Yeah, he's my pick in Sonic the Fighters.
Yeah, and he's weirdly relevant again because he keeps appearing in shit.
He has a cowboy hat and a gun. Like, what's more American than that?
It's very true.
I don't know.
Yeah, so those games, they exist. They're okay. The level design is kind of meh. That's like my big problem with the Game Gear Sonic games. The level design is just, it's not awful, but not great.
You can tell that Sega did not put as much of emphasis on the Game Gear stuff as the Genesis stuff.
Yeah.
Which, like, weirdly enough, I think, like, Sega and also Sony had that issue when they were making their, like, handheld rivals to Nintendo, is that the first party games that were on those, you can tell they were made by the B teams.
Yes.
Whereas with the Game Boy line and the DS line, Nintendo's like, no, these games are just as important. Like, we're going to give you Link's Awakening, like a full Zelda adventure on a Game Boy, Like, Sega wasn't going to do that with, like, a Phantasy Star or, like, a Beyond Oasis. So, yeah, like, the Game Gear and, by extension, Master System games definitely feel lesser and not as important. Which is a shame, I think, because you could have done some really cool stuff with them. But we'll get good handheld Sonic games later.
Yeah. So moving on now to the final Sonic game of the Genesis and Classic era, Sonic 3. I love
Sonic 3 and Knuckles.
Yes. So I love Sonic 3, and so this is where it gets confusing. So Sonic 3 was supposed to be like this mega game that was like huge. And
the Mega Drive.
Yes. And Sega, unfortunately, technology wasn't there at the time for Sega to make this like mega cartridge, at least do it cheaply. So Sega actually comes up with this genius idea to split the game in half, but then give you a way to combine it together and then make a marketing gimmick out of it to sell more, which sounds dumb nowadays, but at the time, that was really freaking cool.
It's the lock-on cartridge.
Yeah, lock-on technology, trademark, as they said.
Which is weird because lock-on, like, cartridges, like a cartridge that you put another cartridge on top of, had existed for years before that, but in a more, like, unofficial fashion.
Yes.
To veer off completely, when the company Wisdom Tree existed and they were making Bible games and everything, you would have to put, like, say for their Doom clone where you play as Noah, you'd have to put a Super Nintendo game on top of it so it could override the lockout chip and play the game.
Super Noah's Ark 3D. I love the.
Yes.
I don't know if it's ever been confirmed, but I love the story behind that, where it gave Wisdom Tree the Doom engine just because they were mad that like they made that crappy version of Wolfenstein on the SNES.
I'm pretty sure that's not true. In fact, I read a book. I'll have to send you the link to it. That's essentially the history of Wisdom Tree.
Okay.
And they go in detail about that. And if I remember correctly, that wasn't the case. I think it was Wisdom Tree just bought the source code from id for Wolfenstein 3D to make the game on, and it's like, yeah, sure, we'll take your money, if I recall correctly. But the history of Wisdom Tree, not to get too off topic, is a very fascinating one.
I can imagine.
And I'll send you the link to the book. It's a really good read.
Cool. Yeah, I can imagine that's probably the more logical reason. It's the less fun reason though.
Oh, for sure. But yeah, it was like, if I recall, it's the only time lock-on technology has been used officially. It was with Sonic and Knuckles.
Yeah, and so. What's very interesting is the way that they did it was really clever, because Sonic 3 initially comes out, and Sonic 3 is a surprisingly short game by itself. You'll understand why later. But as you play through the game, there is a lot of like stuff in it that like you see like these like passageways that you can't clear for whatever reason, and all these sorts of like things that like don't make a lot of sense, that just you kind of question, and it's like, this feels unfinished. Turns out it's because it was unfinished, and that the second half of the game just wasn't ready yet. And go on.
I'm pretty sure they both were ready. It was just
maybe
they split it up because of, as you said, the technology constraints at the time.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. I think they were trying to figure out a way to properly do it, or something like that.
Yeah, I believe the original concept for Sonic 3 was a isometric 3D game, like, say, a Sonic 3D Blast.
So
that was the original idea.
I believe that was a rumor that actually got debunked, because I believe because there is actually a I know the isometric game that you're talking about, because I believe that is actually, believe it or not, one of the many prototypes of what eventually became Sonic Extreme.
It very well could have been. Like, maybe the planning stages for Sonic Extreme could have been in Sonic 3, where they were like, hey, we have the half pipe that has the 3D. What if we try a whole game in 3D?
Yeah.
And I think by this point, like, Donkey Kong Country was out.
Mm-hmm.
So doing, like, pre-rendered 3D graphics was possible.
Yes.
So it probably was an idea in their head.
So going back to Sonic 3, though, this game is probably... So a lot of people prefer 2. I honestly prefer 3, though. I think that's like peak 2D Sonic in a lot of ways. And 3 introduces so many things to the series, including, most famously, the introduction of Knuckles the Echidna.
Good old Suckles.
Yeah. Why is he so dumb?
I don't know.
Why is he creeping in the bushes?
Yeah.
In the cover.
Because he's mysterious, you know? You don't know his story until you play the game and you figure out what he's doing and why he's there.
Why he's creeping in the bushes.
So a lot of it, when for all the Dragon Ball cliches that they like to attach to Sonic, originally he was like the Vegeta, and then they actually made a Vegeta later on, and then Knuckles got like demoted to like Piccolo or whatever. But
that's a good way of describing it. Yeah.
So Knuckles is essentially the antagonist / dual and co-protagonist, whatever it is. Like, I don't know the word right now.
Lawful neutral.
Yes. So what's cool about Sonic 3 and Knuckles is when you attach the games together, it literally becomes this one massive Sonic game. Like, God, it's like 12 stages, I think. It's 12 stages long.
I believe so. And all the stages are big.
They are.
Big, but like not so big like, say, Sonic CD, where they're just kind of like ridiculous. They're all still made very in that style of like having it be linear with different paths, but it all kind of funnels you to where you need to go. And in a way, it's almost like a masterclass of 2D platforming, this game.
Yeah.
Because not to get too excited, but Sonic 3 and Knuckles is probably my favorite game of all time.
Oh, nice.
It's a tie between this and Half-Life 2. I kind of go between them, but this is just when I played Sonic 3 as a kid, to me it felt right. It felt like all of the mistakes they had made in Sonic 1 and 2 were corrected here, and it just like I love the graphics. I love the sprite for Sonic here. I like the little invincibility shield you can create when you jump in the air. Introduces the elemental shields, which are great. Tails is much more easy to control, especially if you try to do the co-op 2-player with it.
Oh, me and Alex know all about that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, Knuckles is a great addition. Probably the last Sonic edition that most people seem to really like, and he's done in such a really clever way, and that like you don't know his deal except he's just messing with you. And then when you end Sonic 3, it's like, yeah, like he falls off and you're like, yeah, I got you. But then when you go to Sonic and Knuckles, he becomes a little bit more sympathetic because you see like Mushroom Hill Zone, you find where like the Master Hyper Emeralds are sitting. And then later on, when you get to Sky Sanctuary, you learn about Knuckles and that he's supposed to be defending the Chaos Emeralds, and he was tricked by Robotnik to protect them from you because he was like, no, you're trying, like Sonic's trying to steal them. I'm actually trying to help you, Knuckles. But in reality, he was just using Knuckles to get them. And all of that is told visually. There's no corny dialogue. There's no text bubbles. Nothing. It is just all pure visuals and just storytelling through gameplay. And I guess a lot of people don't really talk about it with Sonic 3 because that's one of my favorite parts about it is how the sort of the story and the relationship between all the characters is just told purely through like the bit of body language that you get and just through environmental cues. And it's all fantastic.
Totally. Another thing that's cool too is this is the first game that really introduced like continuity to the series, because the game starts with Sonic and Tails flying towards Angel Island on the tornado, and the tornado has the rocket engine from the end of Sonic 2, and Sonic has all the Chaos Emeralds, implying that it's like the good ending of Sonic 2 where you have all the Chaos Emeralds and they're flying off.
Mm-hmm. Until Sonic gets hit by that trap that Knuckles lays for him.
Yeah, I always think of like the Sonic shorts where like if anyone remembers those, where like they make like a song out of it where Knuckles just takes all the emeralds and Sonic's like, give those back, and he's like, no, and just runs off into the background.
That's good. Somebody took the Knuckles theme, or like sort of the mini boss theme from Sonic 3, and like remixed it as like a Knuckles rap song. It's pretty good.
Speaking of music, do we want to touch on the Michael Jackson thing?
I think we need to. I think it's important to the history of this game.
So it's never been 100% confirmed. It never will be. Like Sega's never going to admit it.
I don't think Michael Jackson will ever admit it either.
No, it's kind of hard. But so I'm on the firm belief that it's pretty obvious he was involved at one point. The Sonic 3 ending theme is literally Strangers in Moscow.
Yes.
And Carnival Night is literally Jam. Like it's very clear.
And Ice Cap Zone is basically the same as a song called Hard Times by a guy named Brad Buxer, who was a frequent collaborator with MJ at the time.
Yes.
As well. It's the same song.
And I believe Launch Base also had something like an influence.
Well, it has those like vocal samples.
That's
like,
what it is.
Go! Like that's a very like from because it was MJ's like Dangerous album at the time.
Yeah.
And it's if you listen to the Dangerous album and then listen to Sonic 3, you can make the connections.
Yes.
And so, funnily enough, when you do the Sonic 3 and Knuckles combined cart, all of that stuff, for the most part, gets taken away, and you have the Sonic and Knuckles songs used over it, which was composed by Howard Drawson, who actually reworked some of the tunes from Sonic 3 because MJ never finished it.
Yes.
Obviously. And there's a lot of... The controversy basically is like, when did he leave and why did he leave? Or why was he not brought in? Or why was he let go?
There's two common theories. One of them was that he did not like the Genesis sound card, but I always called BS on that one just because, like, why would he have approved Moonwalker if he didn't like the sound card?
Well, at different times, Moonwalker came out in what, like 1990?
True. Yeah,
Something like that.
that was very early.
Yeah, and then this was 93, 94. So
I believe, though, the official reasoning the unofficial reasoning was, I believe the scandals had just started around this point.
Yes, they did. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. I think it was like MJ and his team were trying to compose the soundtrack for this, and maybe they all felt limited by the sound chip that was in the Sega Genesis. And then that coupled with the allegations first arising, the first round of them.
Yes.
And then Sega being like, maybe we want to distance ourselves from this. I think maybe they both used it as like a, we got other things to do, let's just part.
Yeah.
And then, but the issue remains, still to this day, that Sega didn't take his compositions out. And I don't think MJ ever specifically said yes or no to that. So they just kind of left them in there. And some of MJ's collaborators were credited, but some weren't.
Yes.
And it's Sega being Sega, just fumbling something out of just pure incompetence. And I know some of them have said in interviews that they would, they've thought about taking legal action against Sega because they've never received royalties from it. And for a long time, Sonic 3 never had a proper re-release because of the soundtrack controversy until recently with the Sonic Origins collection, which I still haven't played, so I don't know what they did with that. Did they do the PC songs?
So we'll get into that now, actually. That Sonic PC collection that I had talked about as my first introduction to Sonic infamously actually had, well, besides the fact that the soundtrack was entirely done in MIDI, it sounded terrible. It was three zones had their music replaced. Sonic Ice Cap Zone, Carnival Night, and Launch Base all had new original compositions composed by Jun Sonoy, I believe, actually.
Mm-hmm. How convenient.
Yes. The guy who did all the special stage, bonus stage music, I should say, not the special stage music. Yeah. So for the recent Sonic Origins collection, they unfortunately use those songs. It's not ideal, but I get it. It was either that or we weren't going to get Sonic 3. So
basically, yeah. So in fact, actually, doing just checking. Apparently, Yuji Naka did confirm that Michael Jackson had been involved.
Well, I figured now he just doesn't care and he'll just say whatever. So.
Yeah, but I don't see why he would lie about that.
Mm.
So, but yeah, that was a whole thing. And yeah, as the years have gone on, more has been found out about it, and it's a whole thing. It's weird how it's like this mystery, But well, I guess it only is because of monetary royalty stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's always been the biggest, the most. It's so obvious, everybody knows it, but there's no confirmation. So it's just one of those things that have always kind of looms over the fan base.
Yeah, and it's Michael Jackson's association with Sega doesn't stop there, or even with Moonwalker. He actually is an unlockable character in Space Channel 5 on the Dreamcast. So he was always a Sega guy. Loved the Sonic games to death, which is why he worked on it. But yeah, it's such an interesting wrinkle in the history of this game,
Yeah, no, definitely. And to wrap up though the Sonic 3 discussion real quick though, we have to talk about the special stages,
the best ones.
So Alex, do you know about the Sonic 3 special stages?
Probably not.
So those are the blue spear ones, it's the Sonic's running around on the plane and you have to collect all the blue spears with the incredibly catchy music.
Yep.
I love it. Just keeps getting faster and faster
and
faster and faster.
Yep. Except in the DS port where the speed up never happens.
True.
Yep. Sonic 3 is great, and also we should talk about lock on. You could also lock it onto Sonic 2 to play as Knuckles in Sonic 2,
which is really cool.
And it made the game harder.
It does. In fact, with Sonic 3 and Knuckles, when you play it as Knuckles, it opens those secret passageways that you mentioned, so it gives you a bit of a different story because you're not fighting Robotnik. you're fighting a robot made by Robotnik using his stuff to sort of distract Knuckles while he's doing his thing.
Yes.
Which is, again, more really clever storytelling. It's all very subtle, but it's done very, very well. And also, Sonic 3 introduces a save system,
yes,
which is really nice, especially because the game is so massive. It kind of needs a save system. And it has, I think it's at the end of, which one is it? The one was a Marble Garden Zone. I love that final boss where like Tails is holding you up in the air as Sonic and you have to hit him while he's in the air.
And
I always really like that one.
A fun bit of continuity because Tails isn't present in Knuckles' playthrough. Knuckles has his own entirely unique boss.
Yes, a really good unique boss as well.
So
yeah, I love Sonic 3 and Knuckles.
Oh yeah,
it's so good.
It's my favorite 2D Sonic game by far. Moving on though, interestingly enough, so talking about Sonic compilations. So the Saturn infamously did not have an original 2D Sonic game during its launch. Well, an original Sonic platformer in general. It did have, though, probably in my opinion, the greatest Sonic compilation of all time in Sonic Jam.
Or the correct way to say it, Sonic Jam.
Yes. And Sonic, well, the Sonic ports are pretty good other than occasional slowdown every now and then, but what makes this port super unique is its 3D Sonic World stage. But one thing I wanted to bring up was this compilation has so many old ads for Sonic like programmed into it, including all of these Japanese ones. And Alex, do you remember the Japanese Sonic ads with the really freaky Muppet looking Sonic?
Oh yeah, you showed me that.
Yeah, and you were like super like uncomfortable with them because Sonic is like super wacky looking.
Yeah.
I remember stuff like that.
What's cool about Sonic Jam is that they're not emulated at all.
No, they're like programmed.
Yeah, they were programmed, yes, for the Saturn from the ground up, and that's how they incorporated the normal and the easy modes in there. And yeah, they're all made specifically for the Saturn, which is pretty impressive to do, because usually Sega has a bit of a shoddy history porting old games to newer hardware, but they did a pretty solid job with this. Though it definitely feels like a sort of we messed up, so here you go. With Sonic Extreme. Though, I feel like you skipped over Knuckles Chaotix.
Knuckles Chaotix. I think
a Sonic game.
I think everyone forgets about it because I forgot about it.
I never forget.
So fun fact about Knuckles Chaotix, I found that at a yard sale for $5.
You should have bought it.
I did. I own it.
In box or just the cart?
Complete in box.
All right.
I didn't even own a 32X at the time. Lady didn't have one either. It was just a random copy of Knuckles Chaotix, and I grabbed it.
I mean, you can probably get a 32X in a dumpster somewhere.
I have one now. I've played it. It's the Knuckles bungee jumping game.
Like Knuckles Chaotix. This is such an interesting game. You know, there was that prototype called Sonic Crackers.
That is an unfortunate name.
Yes, especially if you're a Twitch streamer. But and it was the whole ring system with the rubber band and everything. It's not bad. I don't hate that idea, but again, I think Knuckles Chaotix kind of suffers from the issues Sonic CD has, which is the level design is a bit too mazy and cryptic to really complement the sort of gameplay that they're trying to go for. I've tried to beat Knuckles Chaotix, and it's challenging, especially when the levels are almost in like a randomized roulette wheel style that you have to sort of hit the right one to go to the level. You can't just go to the next level.
Yeah, that game is really interesting and fascinating. Like, I love the graphics and I like the idea, but it's like the most like mid Sonic game I think I've ever played. Like it's not bad, but it's like that game gets repetitive so fast. Like, it's not even funny.
It definitely could have been a better game than it actually ended up being.
You can tell very much it was definitely a last minute, like, we have this tech demo that we did nothing with, and we need a Sonic game for the 32X.
Yeah, absolutely. Great soundtrack, of course. But
really cool special stage too, because it's like in actual 3D graphics, and it's kind of like the half pipe if it was fun. because it's like it's like a platformer kind of. It's cool.
Yeah. It is such a unique game, and it's weird how it's like never been ported ever.
I think Sega honestly forgot about it.
like I mean, they did the Sonic Gems collection. They could have just thrown it in there. That would have been an easy throw.
I know, and it also gave us two of the greatest Sonic characters ever made.
SPO and Vector.
No, Heavy and Bomb.
Oh, them too. Yeah.
The greatest Sonic character.
See, I have a soft spot for SPO the Chameleon. I don't know why. There's just something about him that I enjoy. I don't know.
Charmy breaks that game, by the way.
Yes, he does.
Because he can just fly everywhere.
Yeah, he's like Tails with no restrictions.
My favorite is the way it works to get like a party member in that game is there's like a roulette wheel as well, and you have to like, it's like a claw game, and you have to grab the character you want for your partner. But there's significantly more heavies and bombs. If you get bomb, I usually will reset because bomb sucks because all he does is blow up and waste your rings. If you end up with heavy, at least you can pick him up and just use him as a battering ram. No, everywhere you go. And another fun fact is everybody has like a climb or jump, like double jump in this game, so that they can get everywhere. It's just a kind of cool effect.
Yeah, a lot of interesting ideas, but they don't really come together.
Yeah, it's a very cool idea, poorly executed game, in my opinion.
Yeah, which seems to be a running theme with Sonic.
So moving on now, like this was kind of a dry period for 2D Sonic games for the longest time. Like we'd get like, because obviously Sonic was going 3D at this point, and it was a big transition for the series. But the 2D games did live on, and the first one we got after that was probably the most obscure 2D Sonic game to this day, in Sonic Pocket Adventure.
I'm glad you brought this up.
So Sonic Pocket Adventure was a exclusive handheld Sonic for the ever forgotten Neo Geo Pocket Color handheld, and it was actually developed by SNK. And what's fun about Pocket Adventure is it is like a hybrid of Sonic 1, 2, and 3 with like ideas kind of mixed from all three of them into this one game. And
yeah,
you know what? For an obscure Sonic game on an obscure handheld, it's not bad.
It's a shame we have to call the Neo Geo Pocket Color obscured, because if you've ever delved into the history of it, it's actually a really solid handheld.
Oh, some of the best fighting games ever made are released on that thing.
It was a really cool handheld that obviously just could not compete with the mammoth that was the Game Boy.
Yeah,
but
especially during peak Pokemon.
Yeah, like Pokemon, I think just came out at that point, especially in the West. But in fact, I think they tried to have a Pokemon clone on there, but it didn't really work out.
Wouldn't surprise me. A key thing about this game, though, was the developer. So the team that made it, SNK, the people who worked at SNK at that time and worked on this game later split off from the company and formed a little company known as Dimps. And
the infamous Dimps.
We'll be hearing about Dimps a lot going forward, because Dimps would go on to make the next 2D Sonic game. Actually, the next many 2D Sonic games, I should say.
Like the next 5 or 6 or something.
Yeah. So I don't, just for the sake of time, I don't want to dwell too much on these. So I'd rather talk about them as series rather than individual games. But Sonic Advance.
Sonic Advance.
Famously the first original Sonic game on a non-Sega, on a Nintendo platform.
Big deal.
It was at the time. And Sonic...
Because think about it. The Dreamcast was declared dead in March of 2001?
Yes.
And then Sonic Advance, the first one, came out in Japan December 20th of the same year. Imagine that shell shock as a Sonic fan in 1 year, going from Sega's one of the main console manufacturers to now they're making Sonic games for the Game Boy.
Yes.
Couldn't imagine.
So the Advance series is really funny to me because it is one of the most steepest declines in a series I think I've seen, going from 1 to 3.
I mean, there's an incline in there.
True. Yeah, because it's weird because 1 and 2 are really good, and 3 just falls off a cliff. I swear.
They all do something different.
They do.
Like the first Sonic game, the first Sonic Advance feels closer to like a Sonic 1 in that it prioritizes platforming and does a really good job with it. It's very well designed. It has the modern aesthetic, so it has the modern Sonic with the green eyes and everything, and a perfectly surfaceable game.
Good physics for a non-Sonic team game.
Yeah, very solid physics. Boss battles are fine. The last zone is kind of but overall a very solid game overall. Sonic Advance 2, I actually had Sonic Advance 2 as a kid. I played this game all the time.
This is where the speed started really showing.
Yeah, like this is like pre-boost formula, but it feels like it's sort of almost a prototype for the boost formula.
So I was actually talking on another server today when a certain thing got announced, but we were talking about this game in particular, and I was talking with someone, and he had mentioned how he actually thinks that this handling of the boost should have been how they went with it going on, where you have to actually earn it, and it's not just this thing that you have at your disposal at all times.
I mean, you kind of have to earn the boost formula in those games, but it's not the same as this.
Yeah, where it like gradually builds up, which is really cool.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But the level design definitely is built around that, and it rewards you very, very much for doing that. And yeah, it's fantastic. Love the levels in this. I know them off the top of my head because I played this game a lot as a kid.
I'd also, before we get to 3, I'd like to point out though about these two games, the bonus characters that they give you, because not only is Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles playable, but in Sonic Advance 1 you get to play as Amy, which was really cool for the time. And
yes, but getting her is a pain in the ass.
Well, in Advance 1 she's there from the start.
I don't think she is.
Oh,
I could be wrong on that.
I thought it was Advance 2 where you had to unlock her.
I think you have to unlock her in both.
Oh, maybe. You know what? I bought it used, so maybe the guy just unlocked everything already.
Because if I remember correctly, to get Amy in Advance 1, you have to, I believe, get all the Chaos Emeralds and beat Sonic Advance as Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles.
Oh, okay.
To get Amy, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, it is, because those
special... Especially because none of these games of this trilogy handled the special stages well, or the Chaos Emeralds well. So all garbage.
It was either the special stages themselves were terrible, or getting to the special stages was terrible.
Yes.
But I would like to point out Amy's playability in Sonic Advance 1 in particular was really unique, because she didn't have speed and she didn't have like the kind of jumping mechanics that Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles had, but instead she had her hammer, and it kind of makes the game like very different, like from the offset, and it actually is really fun how they handled her overall.
Like, she's definitely the hardest to play, but her hammer just nerfs bosses.
What's fun is too, there's actually ROM hacks of like Sonic 1 and 2 where they actually put Amy in those with her moveset from this game, and
of course they do.
It really makes the games different, like in the long run.
Oh, for sure. There's so many ROM hacks for those games. It's ridiculous, and I'm not surprised they would do that because it is an interesting moveset. But Sonic Advance 2 introduces Cream the Rabbit.
Let's talk about Cream the Rabbit real quick and how she utterly breaks this game.
Yes. Oh, you talk about nerfing boss fights.
Yes. Just Cheese the Chow just cheeses every boss fight.
Yes, his name is Cheese. Yeah, but I love Sonic Advance 2. I know some people don't like the sort of like almost sort of auto-scrolly kind of boss levels, but
I like the idea because of the speed.
Yeah, and I could handle them just fine. I mean, some of them have some BS like one-shot kills, but yeah, they're all handled really well. And yeah, the theme of 2 is speed. That is like the theme that is like implanted in your skull as you're playing it, and it handles the speed really, really well. And you don't really lose that momentum that you could lose in, say, the earlier Sonic games if you're not quite sure what you're doing. Here it is very favored to, even if you're a beginner, you can figure it out. and it makes it a very fun, rewarding game.
And they still
in that regard.
And they still feel like classic Sonic the whole time, which is
it's the perfect bridging of the gap between the classic and the modern.
Yep. And unfortunately, the third entry in the Advanced series does not do that very well at all.
Yeah, I think I tried beating this for the first time earlier this year, and I DNF'd it at the final boss because I was just getting so frustrated that I couldn't do it. And yeah, Sonic Advance 3 is a rough one because the theme in this game is exploration and backtracking
and partners.
And the partner system is okay, but I think it's a neat idea that isn't executed well. Theme. And yeah, they want you to like replay the levels multiple times to get everything. And the level design is, as I've said, it's too mazy. I don't really care for it. Some kind of bad enemy placement, some bad spike placement, and it's just, in a way, kind of a miserable experience. Like, they were definitely trying to make this something unique, but I just really don't think it works overall.
Did you ever hear the famous graphical glitch with the opening cutscene?
No, I haven't.
So the opening cutscene of this, Alex, you'll get a kick out of this. The opening cutscene of this game has Sonic and Tails running off into the distance, and like, so it's Sonic running and then Tails is flying behind him. There was a famous graphical error where a single black pixel was right on Tails' ass.
Oh, I remember seeing that.
Yep. It was edited out from the later revisions.
Oh my goodness.
But it was like, everyone was like, what is that? Is that? And I was just like, Sega, you had one job.
They're trying to censor it.
Yeah, I always remember that because that was a big talking point with this game.
That's really funny. I'd never heard of that before.
But
I like that.
You can look it up on Google. You'll find the images. It's great. Just, be careful how you Google that, though.
Oh, I know.
You got to be anytime you Google anything Sonic related, you got to be very careful.
I open up my Tor browser real quick.
Yeah. So before we move away from Advance, I would like to talk real quick, though, about the special stages / getting to the Chaos Emeralds and how stupid they are. Like, Advance 1, you have to find a spring. That's not bad. Unfortunately, the special stages are awful.
Yes.
Because depth perception is hard.
And you only get one try per each act.
Yes. Sonic Advance 2, the special stages aren't bad. They're just kind of like a 3D area you got to run around. The problem is getting to them, you have to find all these rings in a very specific order.
7 rings in each act that essentially is bottlenecking you into playing the level in the certain way they want you to, and it is utter bullshit.
Yes.
I've never in my life collected all 7 of them in any level. Never cared to. No. Because if you're going to make it that hard to get the Chaos Emeralds, it's just not worth it.
No, it really wasn't.
Like, Dimps has a history of making the special stages ridiculously hard to get to, or them themselves really hard. Don't really understand why. Like, they could have just redone the half pipe with the checkpoint thing, and I would have been fine. I wouldn't have complained.
Yep. And then Advance 3, you have to find Chow, and I don't even remember what the special stage was, because I rarely ever did it.
I believe it's just the half pipe again.
I think you're in the plane, actually. I think you're in the tornado, and that's how they did it.
I thought that was 2.
No, 2's you're on like this open like 3D like space, and you have to run around and collect rings.
Yeah, that's right. But yeah, the one thing I'll give Advance 3 credit for with the collecting the Chow, I think there's like 10 or something in each, but it's in it's in all the zones, I think, combined or whatever.
Yeah.
But it saves it.
That's
so
good.
when you collect a Chow, you have that Chow. You don't have to go back and get them all in one go.
Yes,
which is nice. Like if Advance 2, if they let you collect all the 7 rings, but like in a non-linear fashion, it's like, oh, this time I got a couple, and then it'll save it, and then I can go back and try to get the other ones or something.
Yeah,
it probably wouldn't have been nearly as bad.
No, not at all. So yeah, moving on now to Rush, the Rush series.
I love that band.
Same. uh, so Sonic Rush is, imagine Sonic Advance, but the physics are broken, and now you just run really fast.
And a trick system.
Yeah.
Don't forget the trick system.
And the homing attack is also kind of there.
Yeah, I like the first Sonic Rush game. It's a lot of fun.
It's a great game. I will say the boost kind of covers up how bad the controls are, though.
Yeah, I will agree with that.
Also, you can beat the first stage by just holding right.
Yeah,
it's great.
Which is a common thing I hear people say about Sonic in general, but we're not getting there.
Yeah.
In fact, funnily enough, this was the final mainline Sonic to be produced by current inmate Yuji Naka. So, a little fun fact.
It also, in pre-release, was the final game to feature voice talent from Ryan Drummond.
Yeah.
Because in all the trailers, they used Ryan Drummond's voice. It was later replaced by Jason Griffith on the official game, but fun little fact there.
Mm-hmm. And Sonic Rush introduces, in my opinion, an underrated character in the Sonic series, Blaze the Cat.
Yes.
I find her to be, in a way, a better Silver. Because she kind of has a similar story, you know? She's like an interdimensional like creature or something that came over and is lost and doesn't know what's going on.
Yep.
But she's handled a lot better, particularly throughout the Rush games. In fact, I don't think it's this one. I think it's the second one where she like develops like a relationship with Cream the Rabbit. It's like a friendship, and it's actually like really cute. But yeah, this game it handles taking the Sonic Advance formula, moving it to the DS, and doing something actually really cool with the two screens, having the game essentially be this big vertical experience. It can be disorienting at first when you're playing it, but you do get used to it, and it sort of allows the art style of the game to really breathe, because it looks like gorgeous, because it retains that Sonic Advance style, but using the DS, this hardware, they can do more with it. You know, making like much more detailed, textured areas, and having, you know, a little bit more freedom to kind of make more interesting zones with it, and it's done really well. If I remember correctly, this one has the 3D boss fights.
It does, where it's like a 3D. Well, it's funny. They're on a 2D plane still, but they're fully 3D, like from a design standpoint.
Yeah, and they're not good.
Yeah, they're very long and drawn out.
Yeah.
Soundtrack though.
Very good soundtrack. One of the better ones for sure. I love the Sonic Advance 2 soundtrack. That's one of my favorites. But yeah, Rush does a really good job of the soundtrack. The expanded DS hardware.
The Jet Set Radio guy actually did the soundtrack for this one.
That explains it.
It's really cool.
It's so weird to think about how so many like third-party games used like the DS 2 screens like more effectively than Nintendo did.
Yeah, well, I mean,
you know,
you don't want to pet the dog.
I mean, that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, Sonic Rush, really solid game. I think I played it at the time and I really liked it. I've never beat it, but
the final zones is where like Dimps' infamous like bottomless pit happiness kind of starts becoming very apparent.
Yeah, because that's in Advance 1 as well.
I mean, it's in Pocket Adventure too.
That it is. Sonic Rush Adventure, though, the follow-up.
Oh, this is the game that introduces everyone's favorite character.
Which one is that?
I can't remember her name. Oh yeah, Marine the raccoon.
Oh, who?
The annoying raccoon.
Who?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so Sonic Rush Adventure is in some ways an improvement over Rush, but in other ways it's like too ambitious.
So, Alex, imagine like a game that's like, it's a linear progression game where like you go from left to right, but then you're constantly like roadblocked by like, you need to gather these like things before we can let you move on. So we're going to make you just replay levels to go rather than just going from left to right.
There's a lot of fetch questing and a lot of like mini games where it's like, oh, you're in a submarine and you have to like kill these like robots to get like a treasure, so you can use this treasure to sail to the next level and all this other crap. in some ways, it reminds me of Phantom Hourglass, and that Phantom Hourglass is a very repetitive game that makes you replay stuff, and it feels completely unnecessary and doesn't at all. If anything, it brings the experience down. Rush Adventure, I think, does some of that as well. The boss battles are better than the first game. The normal like 2D stuff is just as good as ever. But yeah, I could see why some people would like it more.
Yeah.
Than the first one, but for me, it's not nearly as focused,
now,
and that's kind of the issue I have with it.
Now, because we're getting close on time, and I don't want to completely skip out on the later ones. I just wanted to point out Sonic Colors DS is also a 2D game. It's basically Rush 3. It's very good, but it's also arguably not as good as the console version, or arguably better, depending on your opinions on the given day.
I mean, it's hard to compare the Wii and the DS versions because they're so different.
Yes.
But if I were to compare Colors DS to the other two Rush games, for me, it's probably the best one.
Oh, it's by far, just in terms of design.
Because the Wisps are utilized in the 2D way so much better than in the 3D way, in my opinion.
Now, moving on from that, this is where we get to probably one of the weirdest moments in Sonic history, where like a game, I swear, went from being praised beyond praise to everyone hates it now. So around 2010, we got this bizarre trailer that I always remember, because it was like all we saw was a ring spinning, and then we just saw the silhouette of like the Sonic logo, like title screen logo, and it was just in black, like shadow. And I remember like everybody was like, okay, what is this? And there was a meme that it was a Pikachu in a sombrero for a while. A lot of goofy stuff like that. And it was known as Project Needle Mouse, and it was supposed to be a throwback to classic Sonic at the time. That's what they said anyways.
Yeah, we wanted to throw it back. Throw it back at Sega, I mean.
Yeah. So this game eventually was revealed to be Sonic the Hedgehog 4. And this was coming right after like one of the lowest points in Sonic's history. Like, we had just come off of 06. Unleashed was a step in the right direction, but was held back by the Werehog. I personally like Sonic and the Black Knight, but a lot of people did not. So it was like a very weird point in the series for Sonic. And
well, I think this came out the same time as Colors, right?
So they came out very close to each other, and I remember because Sonic Colors initially got a very lukewarm reception from fans, and everyone was praising the hell out of Sonic 4. And then the games came out.
Yeah.
And so Sonic 4, from what I've read history-wise, is originally this Sonic 4 wasn't even supposed to be a Sonic 4 initially. It was originally just like this online digital like thing that Dimps was making that was like Sonic HD Adventures or something.
Yeah, probably some like mobile game.
Yeah.
It definitely feels like a mobile game.
Yes. So then Sega at some point decided, let's make it Sonic 4 because the nostalgia bug is high right now, and we got to cash in on that. And the game basically looks like New Super Mario Brothers in terms of graphics. And the problem is they hyped it up as it's going to play just like the classics in terms of like everything. And then we played the games and it literally plays just like Sonic Rush, but without the boost.
I mean, I think to me, this is probably the worst controlling Sonic game I've ever played.
Yeah, it's not good.
There's no momentum at all. He stops on a dime, and it's so just jaggy and like just like it's just off. Like it's wrong. Like Sonic shouldn't control like this. You know, he doesn't need to be this like tight. You know, he's kind of loose, which I think is kind of the point.
You can also like walk directly up a wall, which is great.
Yeah, or you can just walk like a whole loop-de-loop.
Yeah, somehow walking's faster than the spin dash.
It's this game is terrible.
The soundtrack sounds like dying cats. It's
like I remember because you mentioned all the hype. I was hyped for it at the time.
Everyone was. I remember
because I was like, So I was like, ooh, Sonic 4, and they're like, oh, it's going to be just like Sonic 3. And I downloaded it on my Wii, and I played it, and I immediately was filled with regret. I've done that thing many Sonic fans have done, and that's you get excited for the next installment. You buy it, and you start playing it, and you're like, it's not good, but you're trying to convince yourself that, like, oh, maybe it is, maybe it's fine, maybe it's just me. And then you beat the pitifully short episode 1. I played through it multiple times.
Oh yeah.
Trying to see if I could find something, and I never could.
I mean, if you
I got all the Chaos Emeralds. I did basically all the challenges. If I had had it on 360, I would have got all the achievements. And
yeah,
terrible.
So they followed that up with episode 2, which I'll give them credit, was a step in the right direction, but I think it was a little too late.
I never played it.
Okay, so
I think because I was so burned by episode 1 that when I saw episode 2, I just went, no.
So I'll give episode 2 credit. They fixed a lot of things. The physics, while not perfect, are much better. There actually is momentum. It's still not great. Like it's no classics. It's no Christian Whitehead retro engine by any means, but yeah, it was a lot of things were better, like physics wise, graphics, the music. Level designs were horrendous though. Like they were so much worse overall than Sonic 4's.
Like just to, because as you mentioned, everybody like praised Sonic 4 episode 1 at the time. Like its Metacritic, like the highest Metacritic it has is an 81. And then you go to episode 2, the highest Metacritic it has is a 66.
Yeah. And by this point, like there's actually, so Sonic episode 1 ends with like a to be continued kind of thing.
Yep.
That actually exists in the code for Sonic for episode 2, but they dummied it out because even they were like, yeah, this ain't happening.
Because it was supposed to be a trilogy.
Yes.
And they just never did episode 3 because I mean, why would you?
The funniest thing ever though is episode 2 literally ends with like Sonic and Tails heading back to Earth and Little Planet is still encased in the Death Egg.
Some say it's still encased to this very day.
We'll never know.
Oh, that's why I never played it. It never came out on the Wii.
That's right, it didn't.
That's why I never played it, because I couldn't play it. I didn't have anything else to play at the time. My 360 had red ringed, like I think at least a year before that. So
tragic.
I had nothing.
So I guess to wrap this up now, we have the one final 2D Sonic game that came out, and
wow, what a 180 this one is, eh?
It basically reaffirmed everyone's faith in Sonic for a little while, anyways.
I mean, in a way, Sonic Mania is like the ultimate fan game.
It is, because it was made by fans.
Yeah, like hired by Sega to make something faithful because they couldn't do it. Dims couldn't do it. So they're like, let's just pay the fans to do it.
All right.
And it was so good that it completely trampled the other game that released at the time, Sonic Forces, like the main 3D one that was touted as a sequel to Generations. And then that game was what it was. And so Sonic Mania was the one everybody got excited about and played, and everybody loved it. We all still love it. And we will never get a sequel because Sega is bitter.
Yep. So, little backstory behind Sonic Mania. Sonic Mania was developed primarily by two guys in particular. We had previously mentioned both of them, but I'll start with the guy who kind of kick-started this whole thing, and that was Christian Whitehead. And he first jumped onto the scene with, he had made the Sonic CD port for Xbox Live and PlayStation Network back in like 2011, I want to say.
Yep, that widescreen remake.
Mm-hmm. Widescreen from the ground up remake built on his own custom retro engine, which literally replicates the classic Sonics even better than Yuji Naka ever programmed them.
Yes.
And what's fun is Sonic CD is kind of a janky game to play originally. Like Sonic stutters on like tubes and like the ground a lot. Completely fixed in the Christian Whitehead redo.
Though to be fair, Yuji Naka didn't program Sonic CD.
That is true, but even like the classic like Sonic 1 and 2 have some jank in them that has
oh yeah.
has been fixed because after he did Sonic CD, he was given the green lit to do Sonic 1 and Sonic 2 as well. This time bringing in some help from another man that we had previously mentioned known as Stealth, who had made that famous Sonic 1 Genesis proof of concept. And he formed a company called Headcanon, and they basically started a little group that would remake all of these Sonic games from scratch. And eventually they got the okay from Sega to make an original game. And that game would become Sonic Mania.
Which, in a way, is the real Sonic 4.
So I love how they described it, because in reality, their whole idea was that Sonic Mania was like the lost Sega Saturn Sonic game. And they specifically designed it like to look like it was made on a Sega Saturn. Like the 2D graphics are super bright and colorful. They look very similar to a lot of 2D games on the Saturn. And something I picked up on immediately was the special stages. They look like that low poly to like 3D graphics because they were supposed to be emulating the Saturn 3D.
It looks like Sonic World.
It does, and it's like such an awesome throwback, and it's like this is really a cool little idea for like a game. Like, what if we made a Sonic game that was made in like 95, 96, and this is what it could have been.
Yeah, and the Saturn was like the peak era for pixel art. Like so many games from that era still look great by today's standards.
Oh, totally.
And Sonic Mania, I mean, it has that HD shine on it that some Saturn games don't have, but you could probably like, you know, bit crush it a little bit to run on a Sega Saturn, and it would look just as good as it does now.
Oh, totally. And another fun thing too about Mania is the soundtrack by T. Lopes.
Love that soundtrack.
He went above and beyond. It is so high energy and upbeat. There's like so for what is a very simple game, there is so much content in Sonic Mania.
It's so much content, so much fan service, a lot of like deep cut fan service that only weirdos like us would get.
Yeah.
Like the only real criticism people have with this game is that it reuses too many like old zones.
And you know whose idea that was?
Sega's, right?
Yep. Takashi Iizuka.
Takashi Iizuka, a controversial figure in the Sonic, Sonic team.
That was his suggestion.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, it's fine because I think Sonic Mania handles it really well because it'll have the first act be mostly the nostalgic one that you remember, and then when they do the second act, they completely redo it, you know? And I think that was brilliant.
Oh, yeah.
Because even when you're doing Chemical Plant, like you do the first bit and it's like the greatest hits of Chemical Plant. And then when you hit the second act, it's them just saying, all right, we're going to take Chemical Plant and just jumble it up and do our own thing with it. And in a way, it's more memorable than the first act.
Oh, yeah.
Because the creativity these guys have is just completely off the charts.
No, totally.
Like so many like new ideas and even the old ideas, like some of the old gimmicks they take. Like say the last zone, like Pagoda or something, where they use the special stage from Sonic 3 where you jump on the balls and spin around them. They use that as a level design mechanic in there. That's so cool, you know? And that's another little like deep cut reference that is just all over the game. And it was made with love and care, more than most like Sonic official Sega made Sonic games have ever been. And it's just it's a masterpiece. It really is. Like it doesn't overtake Sonic 3 and Knuckles for me because I think that has more like I guess authenticity to it because it's, you know, the original team making it, I guess. But Mania is just like why don't we get more games like this? Like not even just like games with this kind of like passion and love devoted to them, you know? Like there's nothing cookie cutter about it. It's pure like we're making this because we want to make it.
Not totally.
And everybody knows what they're doing and it's fucking brilliant. And it's a damn shame we will never get a sequel for it because Sega is mad.
Yeah.
It's almost like when Nintendo got mad at Rare for Donkey Kong Country to go back to Donkey Kong Country because like they took an IP of theirs and did it better.
It made it better, yeah.
Yeah, and then they got mad at him for it. In a way, it's almost similar to this, but I don't know, man.
Yeah, and time will tell because we did just today actually get the announcement of the next Sonic game, which is 2D, which surprises me.
Yeah. To date this video, it was the Summer Games Fest was today, and in the middle of it, they announced a game called Sonic Superstars.
So, unfortunately, with a lot of Sonic games, I won't be able to give an opinion until I play it because Sonic physics are very hard to judge by just looking at them.
Yeah.
And I will say, graphically, it looks very impressive. They're actually using classic 2D Sonic, which it's in 3D, and like it's kind of like it looks very nice. It's in HD. I'll give it that. I was surprised they used classic Sonic's design. I'll say
Maybe,
right.
I think they're starting to realize that like if we're going to do 2D, we should use the 2D design, and then for the 3Ds, we should use the 3D design, which I think makes more sense.
Yeah, and I like that. I will say though, like right now, until I play it, I don't know. I like the look of it though so far, and I'm cautiously optimistic.
The only issue I have with the look is somebody pointed out to me that it looks very new Super Mario Brothers, and now I can't get that out of my head.
Unfortunately, it does.
It has that look to it. Apparently, it's being made by Sonic Team.
Yeah, it's unclear. They didn't put any like logo in the game anywhere, but
well, according to its Wikipedia page, it's saying it's being developed by Sonic Team.
Okay,
so
well, time will tell on that.
And with Sonic Team, I have no idea if it's going to be any good or not. Like, I'm glad it's not Dimps.
Yeah,
I can say that.
Dimps is better at making fighting games.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, with Sonic Superstars, I think the big thing is like with New Super Mario Brothers, it has like co-op.
Yeah,
so you can play as like Sonic and Knuckles together.
Oh god, I just thought about this. 4-player co-op on a Sonic game. That sounds like a nightmare.
It does sound like a nightmare.
Alex, we're totally doing that.
Oh god.
Yeah, I will totally be doing this in the future when it comes out. My only issue is that I guess when they're like the Best Buy listing had it at 70.
Yeah,
and I was like, I'm not paying $70 for this.
No.
But then I guess a press release came out that said, oh, it's actually going to be 60, which still feels like a big ask for a game of this nature. That's probably not too, like, it's not Sonic Frontiers, for example. So it'll be curious to see how they show it in the future and if they sort of justify the price tag. I mean, I'm gonna buy it because I'm a moron, but like
Sonic fans,
yeah. But I just don't know if I'm gonna wait for a sale or if I'm gonna get it right away.
I bought Boom day one.
I
bought Boom day one. Damn it.
Fucking. That's next time.
Yep. So I guess to wrap this up, I feel really bad because we kind of talked over Alex the entire time.
It's fine.
I'm sorry. So one thing Alex really wanted us to do before we end this off is she wanted to sing the Sonic Heroes song.
No.
Should we save that for the 3D one?
Yeah, maybe we should. What do you think, Alex?
Sure.
All right. So, before we wrap this up, Thrak, do you want to plug anything or?
Sure. Why not? Well, I'm on Twitter at Thrak94. I post on there sometimes, so that's an easy way to communicate with me. I'll plug 2 different podcasts real quick. One, I'm considered a honorary member of, so I'll shout them out. It's a novel console, which is 2 friends of mine, Chris and Carradine, who talk about books, games, and food and all that. I've been on quite a few episodes in their Discord as well, and it's a great show. I love them, and figured I'd give them a bit of a plug. And I guess I'll plug a dead podcast, but it still gets traction, so I figure I'll mention it. And I used to host a podcast called Frame by Frame, which was a song-by-song analysis about the band King Crimson.
Nice.
It ended a while ago due to some personal issues with me and the co-host, but all that's been settled now. We've considered bringing it back, but scheduling is kind of difficult with that. But yeah, for some reason it still gets traction. People still say they like it, so it's still out there. I have it archived so people can listen to it. And yeah, that's, I guess, about it. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, dude.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. And on that note, guys, once again, thank you for joining us on the Gaming and Collecting Podcast. The Gaming and Collecting Podcast can be found on all your major podcasting platforms, particularly Apple Podcast and Spotify. And you can follow us on all the social medias. Our link tree is linktree/the Barber Who Games, and you can join our official Discord where Alex posts a lot of cursed images and we talk about a lot of anime stuff. It's a good time. But on that note, guys, we will see you all next time.
Bye-bye.